It can almost go without saying, but Season 5 of Better Call Saul was incredible, probably my favorite season to this point, and so much credit has to be given to Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould for taking their time with these characters in this world. You can tell they love the story just as much as they did when they started it, and it's going to end up being 12 seasons of television and an entire movie, and you could just look at Game of Thrones to see how sometimes artists grow bored with their projects, so I got to start by giving my appreciation to them. Now on to the season finale, Something Unforgivable. As per usual, I'm going to start with the beginning of the episode and work my way through. There are some things that happen that may seem confusing, and I'm going to give my own view on them. And if you differ, feel free to let me know in the comments section. I'm always interested to hear details or moments that I may have missed. We pick up right after Lalo and Nacho leave for Mexico, and we get that distinct lock at the door, just like when Kim goes into the cell with Lalo. They're still very much locked in with this guy, even though he's not in Albuquerque. And then Jimmy explains the true story of what happened to him to Kim, and she gives him the love and support she's been giving him the entire season for the most part. And it's clear through their interactions that Jimmy's mind is rolling and he's reconsidering things. And I think he's now making Kim's safety his primary goal. The payoff of his internal deliberation comes in what I think is the first of two major quotes that will help us explain Kim's moral shift towards the end of the episode. Jimmy says to her, "Am I bad for you?" And the obvious answer is yes. Jimmy knows he is, and so does Kim. And Kim's tragic flaw is her love for Jimmy. He is the center of her universe, and when he raises the possibility of separation, I think she starts to play the rationalization game. Kim's response is, of course, "Well, Jimmy, you crossed the line, but you're not going to do it again." Kim called Jimmy out earlier in the season when he lied by saying, "I'm not going to go behind your back again, I'm not going to betray you." She understood things perfectly clear then, but right now she is openly deluding herself so she can rationalize staying with Jimmy, and I think Jimmy is starting to realize that. Now on to the Chicken King himself. With Lalo in place, Gus lays out his plan to Mike, and when he said, "I hired the best," my first thought, it was probably your first thought as well. It was, I knew they'd finally get Skinny Pete and Badger involved in the show somehow, and I was crushed when it was just a group of wannabe Alejandros from Sicario, the black uniforms and all that. Gus probably should have gone with Skinny Pete and Badger in the end because his assassins were less than satisfactory, to say the least. Lalo's entrance into his compound is destined to be a meme. I mean, that was just amazing. And I love seeing Lalo interact with all the other cartel guys. He's just that charismatic person you can't not like. And that's really his greatest asset, as I've mentioned before, 99% of the time. He's just a cool dude you want to hang out with and drink with. But when he needs to be harsh, when he needs to be brutal, that charm dissolves very quickly, and the short interactions display that incredibly well. While I'm on the subject of Lalo, I might as well talk about his meeting with Eladio. The car and the money was always the move Lalo was going to make. He understands that if he has Eladio's support, he'll be free to go after basically whoever he'd like. And next season, I think we're going to have a scenario where Eladio is going to look the other way as Lalo attempts to take care of Gus, and Bolsa will be aiding Gus in his attempt to survive Lalo. I also really enjoyed Nacho's interaction with Eladio because it was a great display of how smart Nacho can be when he's forced into a difficult position. He understands these type of people very well. He worked for Tuco for quite a long time, and if you can get on Tuco's good side, you can get on anybody's good side. And notice how when Eladio challenges his idea, he stays respectful yet assertive. He doesn't get frazzled and he doesn't try to anxiously defend himself. That is what Max tried to do before getting killed by Hector, and Nacho understands that showing vulnerability is a serious mistake in this world, and his success with Eladio is his reward for having that understanding. Now I would say as a whole this episode belongs to Kim. When she and Jimmy go to the hotel, it has a weird feeling about it. It's the smart thing to do, but Kim tries to have it both ways. She stays in the hotel for safety, but also wants to go to work. And Jimmy is right to be on edge about her going to the courthouse. And it's interesting that Kim is taking the whole situation less seriously than Jimmy. Her perspective on why things are safe is rational, but still it's a change in character for her. One thing I remembered when Kim is taking all this pro bono work is the quote when Kim is trying to persuade the man to sell his house, and he tells her, "I think you're one of those people who gives a little to charity and volunteers once a year to make up for the things you do every day." Notice how the farther into darkness she drifts with Jimmy, the more she wants to quote unquote help the disadvantaged, and the more she wants a career centered on morality. I think this is Kim trying to strike a balance in her life. If she does all this great work in her career helping people, the more leeway she'll have to get in trouble with Jimmy, or at least tolerate his trouble. And I think that is part of her mind's rationalization, as I mentioned earlier. Her meeting with Howard is what I think is the second big factor in her end of episode behavior. He reveals all these terrible things that Jimmy did, and per usual, Kim tries to swipe them aside, and Howard hits her with what I think is the most important line of the entire season. When Howard is telling her the truth about Jimmy, she says, "You don't know him, I do." And Howard's response is just perfect. He says, "You know who really knew Jimmy? Chuck." As I've pointed out before, everything Chuck said about Jimmy has been true. Now you can argue that his warnings to people became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I would probably disagree, but I think what really hurts Kim here is that she knows it's true. Chuck knew him better than anyone, and everything he predicted about Jimmy has been true. So what does Kim do with that? I think Kim's response is reflected in her moral turn at the end of the episode. Again, she loves Jimmy more than anything. Her number one desire is to be with him and to prosper. But under her current moral code, that just is not feasible, so she adapts in her own way. Kim wants to share Jimmy's moral view so they can be compatible, and trying to rationalize destroying Howard because he's just some selfish, stuck-up lawyer, which we know to be false. That's her making this transition. Kim is no psychopath. She needs a story to tell herself in order to do the things that Jimmy does. Jimmy really doesn't need them as much. It is not surprising that Jimmy is taken aback by her switch because he knows this is not who she is. And I think he also knows that this is Kim trying to make things work with him, and how he reacts to her shift will be one of the key questions moving into season 6, and I'll save my prediction for a separate video. Now on to the grand finale of the episode. First off, Nacho is cold-blooded. I mean, Lalo is just having a campfire with him, offering him some expensive tequila, and then Nacho assists in his murder plot. I mean, I'm not sure if I could have done it. Lalo is just too charming. Maybe to save my dad's life, I guess. But at the same time, it was kind of hard not to feel bad for Lalo because he hasn't been too bad to Nacho, actually. I thought for a second Lalo was going to catch Nacho when he was opening the door and shoot him, but for the second time, the first being the switching of Hector's pills, Nacho escaped just a heart-stopping sequence. Lalo's survival was awesome, the final shot was just brilliant, and the sound of gravel getting louder and louder. And Lalo seeing that old lady dead, it was just great acting from Dalton. You kind of understand his rage. The only problem I have with it, and it's not really a problem per se, if you were watching Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad in chronological order, the final send-off would be a lot cooler in my opinion. He's out to get revenge on Gus, but we know who wins that battle. We also know that none of Gus's main men are going to die. Tyrus and Gus are blown up by Walter, Mike is shot by Walter, and Victor is killed because he got outsmarted by Walter. The only people Lalo can kill are Nacho, which I think is likely, and Kim because she and Jimmy were lying to him and that put him at a disadvantage, so he'll be back for them undoubtedly. Now that isn't to say that Kim and Nacho aren't incredible characters who I'd hate to see die, especially Kim because I think she's one of the best characters on TV, but already knowing that Gus gets the better of Lalo does remove a little bit of tension between the two. I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but Season 5 was amazing, and I'll definitely have a Season 6 prediction video out soon after I have time to digest what happened, and then I might do a video on Chuck, so subscribe if you're interested in more Better Call Saul content, and film/TV content in general. I'm sad the season's over, I'm going to miss talking about all the episodes, but there's no movie to shoot this time around, so hopefully COVID can get out of here and they can start filming as soon as possible. And again, please let me know your thoughts on the episode, and if you think I'm misguided in any of my thoughts or opinions, which is likely, I appreciate any responses you may have. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully, I will talk to you soon. Have a good one.